A Pact for Peace. Washington, D.C., 1920. Lillian Wright had sealed Major Nathaniel Blackwood's study the day he was declared a traitor. The key had been lost for years. Then, one morning, she woke to find the door standing wide open and a half-smoked cigar resting in the ashtray. Chapter 1. The Unsealed Door and the Lingering Smoke. The scent hit Lillian first, a phantom tendril of rich, dark tobacco, the kind Nathaniel had always favored. It curled around her in the hallway, a ghostly caress that sent a shiver not entirely of cold down her spine. Her hand, already reaching for the doorknob of Major Nathaniel Blackwood's study, froze midair. The door was ajar. That was impossible. She had sealed it herself, 2 years prior, the day the telegram arrived. The terse, official words still echoed in her mind, stark and brutal against the memory of Nathaniel's warm laughter. Major Nathaniel Blackwood, declared a traitor. Executed for treason. Actions detrimental to the Allied cause. The key, a heavy, ornate thing, had been tucked away in a drawer in her sewing box, buried beneath spools of thread and forgotten patterns. Or so she had thought. She distinctly remembered locking it. She had to have locked it. Now, the door stood open, a silent invitation into a past she had desperately tried to bury. The faint scent of cigar smoke grew stronger, mingling with the musty odor of disuse. It was a smell inextricably linked to Nathaniel, to evenings spent on the veranda, his voice a low rumble as he recounted tales of his pre-war life, carefully omitting any mention of the horrors he'd witnessed in France. Evenings when the future stretched before them, unblemished, a canvas waiting to be painted with their shared dreams. Lillian pushed the door open further, the hinges protesting with a groan that echoed the unease twisting in her gut. The room was exactly as she had left it, shrouded in the perpetual twilight created by the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the intrusive Washington, D.C. sunlight. Dust motes danced in the faint beams that managed to penetrate the fabric, illuminating a scene frozen in time. His desk, a massive mahogany affair, dominated the room, littered with maps, books, and half-finished sketches of something. She couldn't quite make them out in the dim light. A humidor, crafted from polished burl wood, sat on a corner of the desk. Beside it, an ashtray, a simple crystal piece, held the undeniable evidence. A half-smoked cigar, its ash a delicate, gray curl, rested precariously on the rim. The scent was stronger here, almost palpable, a phantom presence that made the hairs on her arms prickle. She stepped further into the room, her footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug. The air was heavy, stagnant, laden with the weight of unspoken words, of unanswered questions. It felt watched. Lillian circled the desk, her gaze drawn to a framed photograph tucked between a stack of books and a leather-bound journal. It was a picture of them, taken just before he shipped out. Nathaniel, in his uniform, looked impossibly young, his eyes bright with a naive optimism that the war had quickly extinguished. She, in a simple day dress, stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile reflecting his own, though hers held a hint of the apprehension she'd felt even then. She reached for the photograph, her fingers tracing the outline of his face. The glass was cold beneath her touch, a chilling reminder of the icy grip of grief that had enveloped her when she received the news. The grief had been sharp, agonizing, a physical wound that had slowly, painstakingly, begun to heal. But the betrayal that had festered, a constant, throbbing ache beneath the surface. How could the man she loved, the man she had pledged her life to, have betrayed his country, his comrades, her? The questions had haunted her, echoing in the silent chambers of her heart. She had tried to reconcile the Nathaniel she knew, the kind, honorable, fiercely patriotic man, with the traitor the army had condemned. The two images refused to align, creating a dissonance that had left her adrift, lost in a sea of doubt and confusion. And now this. The open door, the lingering smoke, the undeniable presence of something. It was as if Nathaniel himself had returned, a specter from the past, to challenge her carefully constructed reality, to force her to confront the ghosts she had tried so hard to silence. A sudden noise from the hallway, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of fabric made her jump. She whirled around, her heart pounding against her ribs. Her housekeeper, Mrs. Davis, stood in the doorway, her usually placid face etched with concern. "Mrs. Wright? Are you all right?" "I heard a noise." Lillian forced a smile, her hand instinctively moving to smooth down the front of her dress. "I'm fine, Mrs. Davis. Just startled myself. I came to check on the study." Mrs. Davis's gaze flickered to the open door, her eyebrows raising slightly. "The study, ma'am? But it's been locked." "Yes, well," Lillian hesitated, searching for a plausible explanation. I found the key. I thought it was time to air it out." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Mrs. Davis, a woman of few words but sharp observation, didn't press the issue. She simply nodded, her gaze lingering on Lillian for a moment longer before she retreated back down the hallway. Lillian turned back to the room, her gaze falling once more on the cigar. It was a Havana. She recognized it now, the same brand Nathaniel had always preferred. A gift from his uncle, a seasoned diplomat, who had instilled in him a love for the finer things in life, alongside a deep-seated sense of duty and honor. The irony was almost unbearable. She picked up the cigar, its weight surprisingly substantial in her hand. The tobacco was still slightly damp, indicating it hadn't been long since it was lit. But how? Who? The question swirled in her mind, a dizzying vortex of confusion and fear. A faint glint of metal caught her eye. On the floor, beneath the edge of the desk, lay a small, tarnished object. She knelt down, her fingers reaching for it. It was a key. The key. The heavy, ornate key to the study, the one she had thought lost, buried beneath the mundane artifacts of her life. It lay there, brazenly, as if deliberately placed. A message? A challenge? Or a cruel jest from a ghost? The room felt colder now, the air thick with a sense of impending something. Revelation?
Danger? She didn't know.
But one thing was certain. The carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart, around her past, were crumbling. And she was terrified of what she might find buried beneath the rubble. The scent of cigar smoke, a phantom's embrace, was no longer a comfort. It was a warning. Chapter 2. Echoes of Treachery and Whispers of the Past. The key felt heavy in Lillian's palm, cold and strangely unfamiliar. It was the same key, undoubtedly, the intricate carvings on the handle a tactile reminder of the countless times she had seen Nathaniel unlock this very room. Yet, it felt different, imbued with a new significance, a silent testament to the mystery unfolding around her. She slipped it into the pocket of her dress, the metal a cold weight against her thigh. The immediate question who had opened the study and why remained unanswered. The house was secure, the locks hadn't been tampered with. Mrs. Davis, who had been with the family for years, was utterly trustworthy, her loyalty unwavering. There were no other servants, and Lillian hadn't had visitors in days. The possibility of an intruder, while unsettling, seemed unlikely. She returned to the desk, her gaze sweeping over the scattered papers. Most were maps, detailed topographical renderings of various regions in France, marked with strategic notations in Nathaniel's precise hand. Others were documents, official-looking papers filled with military jargon she didn't understand. She picked up a stack of letters, bound together with a faded ribbon. They were addressed to him, in various handwritings, some bearing foreign postmarks. She hesitated, the weight of his betrayal pressing down on her. Did she really want to delve into this? To reopen wounds she had thought were finally beginning to scar over? But the lingering scent of cigar smoke, the undeniable evidence of someone having been in this room, spurred her on. She untied the ribbon, her fingers trembling slightly. The first letter was from his mother, a chatty, affectionate missive filled with news from home, anxieties about his safety, and pleas for him to take care. Lillian skimmed through it, her heart aching at the normalcy of it, the stark contrast to the reality of his fate. The next few letters were similar, from friends and family, each one painting a picture of a life interrupted, a future shattered. Then, she came across a letter that made her breath catch in her throat. It was written in a delicate, feminine hand, the ink faded but still legible. The return address was simply Amiens, France. My dearest Nathaniel, it began. The guns have been silent for 2 days now, a strange and unsettling quiet after weeks of relentless bombardment. I find myself listening for the familiar rumble, a perverse comfort in the midst of this madness. I saw you, just for a fleeting moment, across the crowded field hospital. You were tending to a wounded soldier, your face etched with that familiar mixture of determination and compassion. It broke my heart to see you so weary, so burdened by the weight of this war. But it also filled me with a fierce pride, a desperate hope that somehow, amidst all this destruction, we might find our way back to each other. Lillian's hand trembled, the paper crinkling in her grip. Who is this woman? And what did she mean, find our way back to each other? The letter continued, filled with intimate details, shared memories, and a longing that resonated deep within Lillian's own soul. It spoke of stolen moments, whispered promises, and a love that defied the boundaries of war and circumstance. A love that was clearly not hers. A wave of nausea washed over Lillian. She felt a cold dread spreading through her, a chilling realization that the man she thought she knew, the man she had loved, had been living a double life. The betrayal she had felt before, the accusation of treason, paled in comparison to this. This was a personal betrayal, a violation of the sacred vows they had made to each other. She continued reading, her eyes scanning the words with a morbid fascination. The woman's name was Claire. She was a nurse, working at a field hospital near the front lines. She and Nathaniel had met, it seemed, during one of his earlier deployments. Their relationship had blossomed in secret, hidden beneath the cloak of war, fueled by a desperate need for connection, for solace, in the face of unimaginable horror. The last paragraph of the letter was the most devastating. I know this is dangerous, Nathaniel. I know the risks we are taking. But I cannot bear the thought of losing you, of never seeing you again. I have made arrangements. I will be waiting for you, in Paris, after the war. We will start a new life, far away from all this. Just promise me you will come. Promise me you will survive. The letter was dated just weeks before Nathaniel was declared a traitor. Lillian carefully folded the letter, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She placed it back on the desk, the faded ink a stark accusation, a testament to a love she had never known existed. The room felt smaller now, suffocating. The scent of cigar smoke, once a haunting reminder of Nathaniel, now seemed tainted, laced with the bitterness of betrayal. She had to know more. She had to understand the full extent of his deception. She began sifting through the remaining papers, her mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of a shattered truth. She found more letters from Claire, each one more revealing, more intimate than the last. She found photographs, hidden amongst the maps and documents, of a woman with dark hair and luminous eyes, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Lillian herself. And then she found it, a small, leather-bound journal, tucked away in a drawer beneath a pile of maps. It was Nathaniel's diary. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the cover. This felt like the ultimate intrusion, a violation of his most private thoughts. But she couldn't stop herself. She opened the journal, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. The first few entries were mundane, accounts of his daily life, his training, his early experiences in the war. But as she turned the pages, the entries became more personal, more revealing. He wrote of his love for Lillian, his hopes for their future, his unwavering belief in the Allied cause. Then the tone shifted. He wrote of the horrors he witnessed, the carnage, the despair. He wrote of his growing disillusionment with the war, his questioning of the motives behind it. And he wrote of Claire. He described their first meeting, the instant connection they felt, the way she made him feel alive again, amidst the death and destruction. He wrote of their stolen moments, their shared dreams, their desperate hope for a future together. He wrote of his guilt, his torment, his struggle to reconcile his love for Claire with his duty to Lillian, to his country. And then he wrote of the conspiracy. The words jumped off the page, stark and terrifying. He had stumbled upon evidence of a plot, a betrayal within the ranks, a scheme to sabotage the Allied war effort. He had been trying to expose it, to bring the traitors to justice. But he had been framed. Someone had discovered his investigation and turned the tables on him, accusing him of the very crime he was trying to uncover. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. This changed everything. If Nathaniel was telling the truth, he wasn't a traitor. He was a hero who had been silenced, sacrificed to protect the real culprits. A sudden noise, a sharp, metallic click made her jump. She looked up, her heart pounding. The door to the study, the door she had left ajar, was now closed. And locked. She was trapped. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that she was not alone. The lingering scent of cigar smoke intensified, and a voice, low and menacing, whispered from the shadows. "Looking for something, Mrs. Wright?" Chapter 3. The Major Shadow and the Unsent Letter. Lillian whirled around, her back pressed against the heavy oak door. The room was plunged into near darkness, the only light source the faint, ethereal glow filtering through the gaps in the heavy velvet curtains. The shadows danced and shifted, playing tricks on her eyes, making it impossible to discern any concrete shapes. But the voice was unmistakable, even after all this time. It was a voice she had heard in her dreams, a voice that had once brought her comfort, now laced with a chilling menace.
"Nathaniel?"
she whispered, her voice trembling.
"It couldn't be."
He was dead. Executed. She had seen the telegram, the official notification. Yet, the scent of his cigars, the voice, the shadows shifted again, and a figure slowly emerged from the darkness. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his features obscured by the gloom, but there was something undeniably familiar about his stance, the way he held his head. He stepped closer, and a sliver of light illuminated his face. It wasn't Nathaniel. The man was older, his face lined and weathered, his eyes cold and hard. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, but there was something about him that suggested a military background, a certain rigidity in his posture, a steely glint in his gaze. He held a small, silver pistol in his hand, pointed directly at her. "Not quite, Mrs. Wright," he said, his voice a low growl. "But I'm here on his behalf, so to speak. You could say I'm an associate of the late Major Blackwood." Lillian's mind raced. An associate? What did that mean? Was he one of the conspirators Nathaniel had written about in his diary? Was he responsible for his death?
Who are you?"
she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper.
"What do you want?"
The man smiled, a cold, humorless expression that sent a shiver down her spine. "Let's just say I'm here to clean up some loose ends." The Major was a bit of a liability. He knew too much. "And you, Mrs. Wright," seemed to be following in his footsteps. He gestured towards the desk, towards the scattered papers, the open diary. "Snooping around, are we? Uncovering secrets that were meant to stay buried." Lillian's gaze flickered to the diary. She had left it open, the incriminating entries clearly visible. She had been so caught up in the shock of the revelation, in the sudden appearance of this man, that she had forgotten to conceal it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, her voice shaking. The man chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mrs. Wright. I know what you found. I know about the diary, about the letters, about Claire." The mention of Claire's name sent a jolt of fear through Lillian. He knew everything. He was one of them. "Nathaniel was innocent," she said, her voice gaining a newfound strength, fueled by a surge of anger and defiance. "He was framed. He was trying to expose a conspiracy, a plot to sabotage the war effort." The man raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Is that what he told you? Or rather, what he wrote in his little diary? A convenient narrative, wouldn't you say? A way to paint himself as the hero, the victim?" "It's the truth," Lillian insisted. "He wouldn't lie. He wouldn't betray his country." The man took a step closer, the pistol unwavering. "Loyalty is a fluid concept, Mrs. Wright. especially in times of war. People make choices. They make sacrifices. Sometimes, those choices have unintended consequences. He paused, his gaze lingering on her face. The Major made a choice. He chose to pursue a dangerous path, a path that led to his demise. And you, Mrs. Wright, are about to make a similar choice. You can cooperate, tell me everything you know, hand over the diary and the letters, and perhaps I can find a way to let you live. Or you can resist and face the consequences. Lillian's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Fear, anger, confusion, and a growing sense of determination. She had to protect Nathaniel's memory, his reputation. She had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. She looked the man straight in the eye, her voice steady. I won't betray him. I won't let you silence him again. The man's smile widened, a chilling expression that revealed a hint of admiration. Brave words, Mrs. Wright, but ultimately futile. You see, I have insurance. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He held it up, the faint light illuminating the familiar handwriting. It was a letter addressed to Lillian, in Nathaniel's hand. This was found amongst the Major's belongings, the man said. An unsent letter, a rather revealing letter. It seems the Major had some second thoughts about his relationship with you. He was planning to leave you, Mrs. Wright, to run away with his mistress. He unfolded the letter, his eyes scanning the words. Shall I read it to you? It's quite poignant. Lillian's world tilted on its axis. An unsent letter? Nathaniel had planned to leave her? For Claire? The betrayal she had felt before, the pain of discovering his secret affair, was nothing compared to this. This was a dagger to the heart, a final, crushing blow. She stared at the letter, her vision blurring with tears. She couldn't believe it. It couldn't be true. Nathaniel loved her. He had told her so, countless times. He had promised her a future, a life together. But the letter, the handwriting, it was undeniable. The man began to read, his voice a mocking drone, reciting the words that shattered the last vestiges of Lillian's faith, her trust, her love. He was reading the death sentence, the final nail in the coffin of her and Nathaniel's love story. A story that was supposed to have ended with a happily ever after, now turned out to be nothing more than a carefully weaved fabrication. He was about to reveal the ending. She already felt defeated. The tears streamed from her eyes, blurring her vision, and there wasn't a single bit of strength left in her to deny the obvious. Chapter 4. A gathering storm of suspicion and remembrance. The man's voice droned on, each word of Nathaniel's supposed betrayal a fresh wound. Lillian barely heard him. Her mind was reeling, struggling to reconcile the image of the man she loved with the cold, calculating words on the page. The letter spoke of regret, of a love that had faded, of a desire for a different life, a life with Claire. It painted a picture of a man trapped in a loveless marriage, yearning for freedom, for escape. That I cannot continue this charade any longer, Lillian. The war has changed me, changed us. I have found a love that consumes me, a love that makes me feel alive in a way I never thought possible. I know this will hurt you, but I cannot live a lie any longer. I am leaving. I am going to Claire. Please try to understand. The man stopped reading, a smug expression on his face. Quite the confession, wouldn't you say? It seems your beloved Major wasn't the hero you thought he was. Lillian couldn't speak. She felt numb, hollowed out. The pain was so intense, so overwhelming, that it had transcended physical sensation. She felt as if she were drowning, suffocating in a sea of betrayal and despair. The man folded the letter, his gaze lingering on her face. Now, Mrs. Wright, let's be reasonable. Hand over the diary and the other letters, and I'll leave you to grieve.
In peace.
But something within Lillian snapped. A flicker of doubt, a spark of defiance, ignited amidst the ashes of her shattered heart. She looked at the man, at the letter in his hand, and a sudden wave of clarity washed over her. It didn't make sense. The Nathaniel she knew, the man she had loved, was not capable of such cruelty. He was honorable, compassionate, fiercely loyal. Even in his diary, amidst his confessions of his love for Claire, he had expressed his guilt, his torment, his struggle to reconcile his conflicting emotions. He had never once spoken of leaving her, of abandoning their life together. And there was something else. Something about the letter, the tone, the phrasing, it didn't sound like him. It was too formal, too stilted, too convenient. It was as if someone had deliberately crafted it to inflict maximum pain, to break her spirit. "That letter, it's a forgery," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The man raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "A forgery? Is that what you think? Are you calling your beloved Major a liar?" "I'm calling you a liar," Lillian retorted. "That letter is not in Nathaniel's handwriting. It's not his words. You wrote it, didn't you? You're trying to manipulate me, to get me to hand over the evidence." The man's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. "You're grasping at straws, Mrs. Wright. You're in denial. Accept the truth. Your husband betrayed you. He was a traitor and a liar." "He was a hero," Lillian insisted, her voice rising. "He was trying to expose a conspiracy, and you killed him for it. You framed him, and now you're trying to silence me." She took a step towards him, her eyes blazing with anger. "I won't let you get away with it. I will find the truth. I will clear his name." The man's hand tightened on the pistol. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Wright. I suggest you reconsider your position." "I'm not afraid of you," Lillian said, her voice unwavering. "I have nothing left to lose." A tense silence filled the room, the only sound the ragged breathing of the two adversaries. The shadows seemed to deepen, the air thick with unspoken threats. Suddenly, a noise from outside the room broke the stalemate. A loud crash, followed by the sound of shouting. The man's head snapped towards the door, his eyes widening in alarm. "What was that?" he muttered, his grip on the pistol loosening slightly. Lillian seized the opportunity. She lunged forward, knocking the pistol from his hand. It clattered to the floor, skidding across the polished wood. The man roared in anger, lunging for her. She dodged his grasp, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out of the room, to get help. She ran towards the door, her hand reaching for the knob. But the man was faster. He grabbed her arm, his grip like a vice. She struggled against him, her nails digging into his flesh. "Let me go," she cried, her voice hoarse with fear and desperation. He pulled her towards him, his face contorted with rage. "You're not going anywhere, Mrs. Wright. You're going to tell me everything you know." Suddenly, the door burst open, and a figure stood silhouetted in the doorway. It was Mrs. Davis, her usually placid face transformed into a mask of fury. She held a heavy iron poker in her hand, raised above her head. "Get away from her, you scoundrel," she yelled, her voice shaking with righteous anger. The man released Lillian, turning to face the new threat. Mrs. Davis swung the poker, striking him across the head. He staggered backwards, his eyes rolling up into his head. He collapsed to the floor unconscious. Lillian stood there, trembling, her body aching, her mind reeling. Mrs. Davis rushed to her side, her arms wrapping around her in a protective embrace. "Are you all right, Mrs. Wright? Did he hurt you?" Lillian shook her head, unable to speak. She looked at the unconscious man on the floor, at the pistol lying beside him, at the forged letter clutched in his hand. The storm had broken, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was just the beginning. The gathering suspicion was only to get bigger. The man would not give up. Chapter 5. The Wartime Nurse and the Forbidden Correspondence. The immediate chaos subsided, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The intruder, identified by Mrs. Davis as a Mr. Silas Thorne, a name that meant nothing to Lillian, was bound and gagged, awaiting the arrival of the police. Lillian, still shaken but remarkably composed, insisted on returning to the study. The forged letter lay on the floor where Thorne had dropped it, a stark reminder of the deception that had almost broken her. Mrs. Davis, ever practical, brewed a strong cup of tea, her presence a calming anchor in the storm-tossed room. As Lillian sipped the hot liquid, she tried to make sense of the events that had transpired. Thorne's claims, the forged letter, the attempt to silence her, it all pointed to a conspiracy that reached far beyond Nathaniel's supposed treason. But who were these people? And what were they so desperately trying to hide? The answer, she suspected, lay within the letters from Claire, the wartime nurse who had stolen Nathaniel's heart. She retrieved the stack of correspondence from the desk, her hands still trembling slightly. She had read the first letter, the one that had revealed the existence of their affair, but she hadn't had the courage to delve any further. Now, she felt compelled to, driven by a desperate need to understand the full story, to uncover the truth behind Nathaniel's death. She began reading, her eyes scanning the delicate handwriting, each word a window into a world of clandestine meetings, stolen moments, and a love that blossomed amidst the horrors of war. Claire's letters were filled with vivid descriptions of life in the field hospital, the constant influx of wounded soldiers, the overwhelming sense of loss and despair. She wrote of the challenges she faced, the lack of resources, the constant threat of bombardment. But amidst the darkness, there was a light. Her love for Nathaniel. She described their encounters, the brief moments they were able to steal away from their duties, the whispered conversations, the shared hopes for a future together. She wrote of his kindness, his compassion, his unwavering commitment to his men. She portrayed a man torn between his duty and his heart, a man struggling to reconcile his love for her with his obligations to Lillian, to his country. As Lillian read, she began to see Nathaniel through Claire's eyes. She saw a man she recognized, a man she had loved, but also a man she had never fully known. The war had changed him, hardened him, but it had also revealed a depth of passion, a capacity for love, that she had only glimpsed before. And she began to understand. She understood the desperate need for connection, for solace, in the face of unimaginable horror. She understood the allure of a love that offered an escape from the brutality of war, a promise of a different life. She also began to see Claire not as a rival, but as a fellow victim of circumstance, a woman caught in the crossfire of a conflict that had stolen everything from her. Claire's letters were filled with a longing for peace, for a return to normalcy, for a future where she and Nathaniel could be together, without fear, without secrets. But there was something else in the letters, something that hinted at a deeper connection between Claire and Nathaniel's work. She wrote of passing messages, of relaying information, of helping him with his investigation. She didn't elaborate. She didn't reveal any specific details, but it was clear that she was involved, somehow, in his efforts to expose the conspiracy. One letter, in particular, caught Lillian's attention. It was dated just a few days before Nathaniel's death. "My dearest Nathaniel," it read, "I have the information you requested. It is dangerous, Nathaniel, more dangerous than you realize. These people are ruthless. They will stop at nothing to protect their secrets. I fear for you, my love. I fear for us. Please be careful. I have hidden the documents in the usual place. I will be waiting for you as always. Come back to me, my love. Come back to me safe." Lillian's heart pounded in her chest. The documents. What documents? And what was the usual place? This letter was a crucial piece of the puzzle, a key to unlocking the mystery surrounding Nathaniel's death. She reread the letter several times, searching for any hidden clues, any hints that might reveal the location of the documents. But there was nothing. The usual place could be anywhere, anything. She looked around the study, her gaze sweeping over the familiar objects, the books, the maps, the photographs. Had Nathaniel hidden something here? Had he left a message for her, a clue to his innocence? She remembered the half-smoked cigar, the undeniable evidence of Thorne's presence in the room. He had been searching for something, she was certain of it. The diary, the letters, the documents. She stood up, her legs trembling slightly. She had to find them. She had to clear Nathaniel's name, to expose the truth, to bring the real traitors to justice. She had to do it for him, for Claire, and for herself. She began searching the room, her hands moving systematically over every surface, every object. She opened drawers, she rifled through papers, she examined every book, every map. She found nothing. Hours passed, and the room grew dark. Mrs. Davis brought her a lamp, her face etched with concern. Lillian refused to give up. She continued searching, driven by a desperate hope, a fierce determination. And then she saw it, a small, almost imperceptible scratch on the underside of the desk, near the back. She knelt down, her fingers tracing the outline of the scratch. It was a deliberate mark, a tiny symbol, a keyhole. She remembered the key, the one she had found on the floor, the one that had opened the study. She retrieved it from her pocket, her hand trembling. She inserted the key into the hidden keyhole, her heart pounding in her chest. It fit. She turned the key and a small, hidden compartment clicked open. Inside lay a single, sealed envelope. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. She had found it. The documents. The evidence that would prove Nathaniel's innocence. The evidence that would expose the conspiracy. The answer to all the question was within reach. The key was in her hand. Chapter 6. Beneath the surface of duty and deception. Lillian's fingers trembled as she reached for the sealed envelope. It was surprisingly heavy, the paper thick and expensive, bearing no markings or address. This was it, the key to unlocking the mystery that had consumed her, the evidence that could vindicate Nathaniel and expose the true traitors. She carefully broke the seal, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, she found a collection of documents, handwritten notes, coded messages, official-looking reports, and several photographs. The first document she unfolded was a detailed list of names, some familiar, others unknown to her. Next to each name was a brief notation, a series of numbers and letters that she couldn't decipher. She recognized some of the names. High-ranking military officials, prominent politicians, influential businessmen. These were men of power, men of influence, men who were supposed to be leading the Allied war effort. But, according to this document, they were involved in something far more sinister. She continued sifting through the papers, her mind racing, trying to make sense of the information. The coded messages were indecipherable, but the handwritten notes, written in Nathaniel's distinctive script, provided some context. He wrote of secret meetings, clandestine transactions, and a deliberate effort to sabotage the Allied war effort. He mentioned shipments of faulty weapons, deliberately flawed intelligence reports, and strategic maneuvers that resulted in devastating losses for Allied troops. The photographs were even more damning. They showed several of the men on the list, meeting in secret locations, exchanging documents, engaging in what appeared to be illicit transactions. One photograph, in particular, made her blood run cold. It showed Mr. Silas Thorne, the man who had broken into her home, shaking hands with a high-ranking military official, a man she recognized as General Alistair Croft, a close friend of Nathaniel's father. Lillian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Croft? He was one of Nathaniel's mentors, a man he had admired and respected. Could he be involved in this? Could he be one of the traitors? The implications were staggering. This conspiracy reached the highest levels of power, involving men who were entrusted with the lives of millions of soldiers. These were men who were supposed to be fighting for their country, but instead, they were betraying it for their own personal gain. Lillian felt a surge of anger, a righteous fury that burned away the last vestiges of her grief and despair. These men had murdered Nathaniel, they had framed him, and they had tried to silence her. She wouldn't let them get away with it. She would expose them. She would bring them to justice, no matter the cost. But how? She was just one woman, armed with a collection of documents that most people would dismiss as the ravings of a disgraced traitor. She needed help. She needed someone she could trust, someone with the power and influence to investigate this conspiracy and bring the culprits to justice. She thought of her uncle, Senator Harrison Bellwether, a powerful and influential figure in Washington, D.C. He was a man of integrity, a man of principle, a man who would believe her. She would go to him, she would show him the documents, she would tell him everything. But first, she needed to decipher the coded messages. She needed to understand the full extent of the conspiracy, to identify all the players involved. She remembered Claire's letters, the mention of passing messages, of relaying information. Claire had been involved in Nathaniel's investigation. She had helped him decipher the codes. Perhaps she had left a key, a cipher, something that would help Lillian unlock the secrets hidden within the documents. Lillian returned to the stack of Claire's letters, her fingers searching for any clue, any hint that might lead her to the cipher. She reread the letters, paying close attention to any mention of codes, of messages, of secret communications. And then she found it. In one of the letters, Claire had written that I have devised a simple substitution cipher using the first letter of each line of our favorite poem, The Raven, as the key. It is not foolproof, but it should be enough to deter prying eyes. The Raven. Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem. Lillian knew it by heart. She had often recited it with Nathaniel, their voices blending in a shared appreciation for the haunting beauty of the words. She quickly retrieved a copy of the poem from the bookshelf, her hands trembling with anticipation. She began deciphering the coded messages, using the first letter of each line of The Raven as the key. It was a slow, painstaking process, but gradually, the secrets hidden within the documents began to unravel. The coded messages revealed a network of spies, informants, and saboteurs, operating within the Allied ranks. They detailed the specific acts of sabotage, the names of the individuals involved, and the devastating consequences of their actions. They confirmed Nathaniel's suspicions, and they implicated even more people than he had initially identified. As Lillian deciphered the messages, a chilling picture emerged. This was not just a conspiracy to sabotage the war effort, it was a plot to overthrow the government, to seize power and establish a new world order. A new world order built on greed, corruption, and the blood of innocent soldiers. Lillian felt a cold dread spreading through her. This was bigger, more dangerous, than she had ever imagined. She was holding in her hands the evidence that could bring down an entire regime, a regime that would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. She knew she had to be careful. She couldn't trust anyone. She had to protect the documents, and she had to get them to her uncle, Senator Bellwether, as quickly as possible. She carefully placed the deciphered messages, along with the original documents and photographs, back into the envelope. She sealed it, and then she hid it, not in the study, but in a secret compartment in her bedroom, a place where no one would ever think to look. She was ready. She was armed with the truth. And she was determined to fight. The fight was not over. It was far from over. It had just begun. The deception was about to be revealed. Chapter 7. The Ghost of Amiens and the Unspoken Promise. The weight of the envelope, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her bedroom, felt heavy, a constant reminder of the dangerous path she had embarked upon. Lillian knew she had to act quickly to get the evidence to Senator Bellwether before Thorne's associates could make another move. But she also felt a nagging sense of unease, a feeling that she was missing something, a piece of the puzzle that was still eluding her. It was Claire, the wartime nurse, the woman who had loved Nathaniel, the woman who had helped him with his investigation. Lillian couldn't shake the feeling that Claire held the key to understanding the full extent of the conspiracy, that she knew more than she had revealed in her letters. She decided to revisit the letters, focusing on the ones written from Amiens, the town where Claire had been stationed. She reread them, searching for any hidden clues, any subtle hints that might shed light on Claire's role in the events leading up to Nathaniel's death. As she read, she noticed a recurring motif, a subtle detail that she had overlooked before. Claire often mentioned a specific location in Amiens, a small, abandoned church on the outskirts of town, known locally as Le Fantôme d'Amiens, the Ghost of Amiens. She described it as a place of peace, a sanctuary where she and Nathaniel would often meet, away from the prying eyes of the military. We met at Le Fantôme d'Amiens again today. The old church is crumbling, but it still holds a certain beauty, a sense of serenity that is hard to find in this war-torn world. We sat beneath the shattered stained glass window, listening to the silence, and for a brief moment, we forgot the horrors that surrounded us. Lillian remembered Nathaniel mentioning the church in his diary, describing it as a place where he felt a sense of connection to something larger than himself, a place where he could find solace and clarity. He had also mentioned meeting Claire there, sharing their dreams, their hopes for a future together. But there was something else. Something about the way Claire described the church, the way she emphasized its isolation, its secrecy. It was as if she were hinting at something more, something that she couldn't reveal directly in her letters. Lillian had a sudden intuition, a gut feeling that Le Fantôme d'Amiens held a secret, a hidden message, perhaps even another set of documents that Nathaniel had left behind. It was a long shot, but she couldn't ignore it. She decided to contact someone who might be able to help her, someone who had known Nathaniel during the war, someone who might have information about Claire and the church in Amiens. She thought of Captain David Reynolds, a close friend of Nathaniel's, a fellow officer who had served with him in France. She had met Reynolds briefly after Nathaniel's death, but she hadn't spoken to him since. She found his address in Nathaniel's address book, a small, leather-bound volume filled with names and addresses of friends, family, and colleagues. She penned a letter to Reynolds, explaining her situation, her discovery of the conspiracy, and her suspicions about Claire and Le Fantôme d'Amiens. She asked for his help, his guidance, his discretion. She mailed the letter, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. She didn't know if Reynolds would believe her, if he would be willing to help her. But she had to try. She had to exhaust every possible avenue to uncover the full truth. Days turned into weeks, and Lillian waited anxiously for a reply from Reynolds. She continued to prepare for her meeting with Senator Bellwether, gathering all the evidence, organizing the documents, rehearsing her story. She knew she had to be prepared, to present a compelling case, to convince him of the gravity of the situation. The city was abuzz with rumors, whispers of a growing unrest, a sense of impending change. The war had ended, but the scars remained, deep and festering. The economy was struggling, unemployment was high, and the people were disillusioned with the government, with the promises that had been broken. Lillian felt a growing sense of urgency. The conspiracy she had uncovered was not just a threat to her, to Nathaniel's memory, it was a threat to the entire nation. She had to expose it before it was too late. Finally, a letter arrived. It was from Captain Reynolds. His reply was brief but encouraging. He remembered Nathaniel well, he remembered Claire, and he remembered Le Fantôme d'Amiens. He confirmed Lillian's suspicions, admitting that Nathaniel had used the church as a secret meeting place, a place to store sensitive information. He also revealed that Claire had been more than just a nurse. She had been an intelligence operative, working for a clandestine branch of the Allied forces. Lillian's heart skipped a beat.
Claire was a spy.
She had been working alongside Nathaniel, gathering intelligence, exposing the conspiracy. She had been risking her life, just like him. Reynolds' letter ended with a cryptic message. Did I believe there is something hidden in the church, something Nathaniel left behind? Look for the unspoken promise, the one made beneath the shattered, stained glass window. It will lead you to the truth. The unspoken promise. Lillian remembered Claire's letter, the one where she described meeting Nathaniel at Le Fantôme d'Amiens, sitting beneath the shattered, stained glass window. What was the unspoken promise? What had they promised each other? She knew she had to find out. She had to go to Amiens. She had to find Le Fantôme d'Amiens. She had to uncover the final secret, the one that would expose the conspiracy and bring justice to Nathaniel and Claire. The promise that was made needed to be kept. Chapter 8. Cracks in the facade of loyalty and love. The decision to travel to Amiens was fraught with peril. Lillian was acutely aware that she was a target, that Thorne's associates, likely the very people Nathaniel had been investigating, would be watching her every move. Leaving the country, especially under the current circumstances, would raise suspicion. But the cryptic message from Captain Reynolds, the unspoken promise hidden within the ghost of Amiens, was a lead she couldn't ignore. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the key to unlocking the full truth of Nathaniel's death and the conspiracy that surrounded it. She confided in Mrs. Davis, her loyal housekeeper, who, despite her initial shock and concern, proved to be an invaluable ally. Mrs. Davis, a woman of quiet strength and resourcefulness, helped Lillian devise a plan. They would fabricate a story, a plausible reason for Lillian's sudden departure. Lillian, they would claim, was traveling to England to visit a distant relative, a sickly aunt who had requested her presence. Mrs. Davis would handle the arrangements, booking passage on a steamship, securing the necessary travel documents, and discreetly packing Lillian's belongings. The most challenging aspect was concealing her true destination. Lillian couldn't risk anyone knowing she was traveling to Amiens, especially not to a location connected to Nathaniel and a clandestine operation. She decided to book passage under an assumed name, a simple alias that wouldn't draw undue attention, Mrs. Eleanor Clark. The name was a subtle homage to Claire, the woman who had shared Nathaniel's final days and who, Lillian now believed, held the key to his vindication. As the day of departure approached, Lillian grew increasingly apprehensive. She knew she was stepping into a dangerous game, a world of espionage and betrayal, where one wrong move could have fatal consequences. She revisited Nathaniel's diary, rereading his entries about the conspiracy, about Claire, about Le Fantôme d'Amiens. She searched for any hidden clues, any subtle hints that might help her navigate this treacherous landscape. She also reread Claire's letters, focusing on the ones that described their meetings at the church. She tried to visualize the scene, the crumbling walls, the shattered stained glass window, the unspoken promise that hung in the air. What was it? What had they promised each other? One passage, in particular, caught her attention. Claire had written, "We stood beneath the angel, its wings broken, its gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Nathaniel took my hand, and he swore to me that he would find a way to expose the truth, to bring the traitors to justice. He said he would do it for me, for us, for the future we dreamed of. And I promised him that I would be there, waiting for him, always." The angel, the broken wings, the distant horizon. Lillian realized that the unspoken promise was not a specific phrase, but a symbolic representation of their shared commitment, their determination to fight for justice, to create a better world. And the angel, the broken angel beneath the stained glass window, was the key. She packed a small bag, including the envelope containing the evidence, a copy of The Raven, and a photograph of Nathaniel and Claire, taken at Le Fantôme d'Amiens, that she had found tucked away in his diary. She also included a small, silver locket that Nathaniel had given her, containing a miniature portrait of him. It was a tangible reminder of the man she loved, the man she was fighting for. The night before her departure, Lillian visited Nathaniel's study one last time. The room was still filled with his presence, the faint scent of his cigars lingering in the air. She stood before his desk, her gaze sweeping over the familiar objects, the maps, the books, the photographs. She felt a profound sense of sadness, of loss, but also a renewed sense of determination. She whispered a promise to him, a promise to clear his name, to expose the truth, to bring the traitors to justice. She would do it for him, for Claire, and for all those who had suffered because of their greed and corruption. The next morning, Lillian, disguised as Mrs. Eleanor Clark, boarded the steamship bound for England. As the ship pulled away from the harbor, she looked back at the receding skyline of Washington, D.C., her heart filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She was leaving behind everything she knew, everything she held dear, but she was also embarking on a journey that could change everything. The voyage was long and arduous, but Lillian used the time to prepare herself, to study the documents, to memorize the details of the conspiracy, to steel herself for the challenges ahead. She knew she was walking into a den of vipers, but she was determined to emerge victorious. She had the truth on her side, and she had the memory of Nathaniel to guide her. The cracks that were forming in the facade that surrounded her would soon, very soon, give in to the truth. She knew it. Chapter 9. The Price of Silence and the Weight of Secrets. The crossing was uneventful, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within Lillian. As Mrs. Eleanor Clark, she kept to herself, attracting minimal attention. The assumed identity felt like a thin veil, offering a fragile layer of protection in a world teeming with unseen dangers. Upon arriving in England, she immediately booked passage on a smaller vessel bound for France, specifically the port city closest to Amiens. The closer she got to her destination, the more palpable the tension became. Every stranger's gaze felt like an accusation, every whispered conversation a potential threat. She clutched the locket containing Nathaniel's portrait, drawing strength from his memory, from the unspoken promise that bound them together, even in death. Amiens was a city scarred by war, its buildings pockmarked with bullet holes, its streets echoing with the ghosts of battles past. The atmosphere was heavy, laden with a sense of loss and resilience. Lillian found a small, unassuming hotel near the train station, checking in under her alias. She spent the first day discreetly exploring the town, familiarizing herself with the layout, locating the outskirts where Le Fantôme d'Amiens was said to stand. She learned from hushed conversations in local cafes that the church was considered a cursed place, avoided by most of the townsfolk. It was said to be haunted by the spirits of those who had died during the war, their cries echoing through the ruined nave on moonless nights. The stories only fueled Lillian's determination. She knew that the ghosts of Amiens were not supernatural entities, but the victims of a very real, very human conspiracy. The next day, she set out for the church. It was a long walk, through winding streets and desolate fields, a journey that mirrored the arduous path she had taken to uncover the truth. As she approached the church, she saw it a crumbling stone structure, its roof partially collapsed, its windows shattered, a stark silhouette against the gray sky. It was exactly as Claire had described it, a place of desolation and beauty, a sanctuary haunted by the echoes of war. Lillian approached the church cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a smell that mingled with the faint, lingering aroma of tobacco. She paused, her senses on high alert. Had someone been here recently? Someone who smoked the same brand of cigars as Nathaniel? She entered the church, her footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. The interior was in ruins, the floor covered in rubble, the walls scarred with graffiti and the ravages of time. But amidst the destruction, there was a sense of serenity, a quiet dignity that defied the surrounding chaos. She made her way towards the altar, her gaze drawn to the shattered stained glass window that Claire had described. Beneath it, she saw the angel, its wings broken, its gaze fixed on the distant horizon. It was a poignant symbol of hope amidst despair, of resilience in the face of adversity. Lillian remembered Captain Reynolds' message, "Look for the unspoken promise," the one made beneath the shattered stained glass window. She examined the angel closely, her fingers tracing the contours of its broken wings. She searched for any hidden compartments, any secret markings, any clue that might lead her to Nathaniel's hidden message. She found nothing. She stepped back, her gaze sweeping over the surrounding area. She examined the floor, the walls, the altar. She searched for any sign of disturbance, any indication that someone had been here before her. And then she saw it. A small, almost imperceptible scratch on one of the stone slabs beneath the angel, near the base of the wall. It was similar to the scratch she had found on Nathaniel's desk, the one that had led her to the hidden compartment. She knelt down, her heart pounding with anticipation. She ran her fingers over the scratch, feeling for any hidden mechanism, any secret latch. She found it, a small, almost invisible button, concealed within the intricate carvings of the stone. She pressed the button, and a section of the stone slab slid open, revealing a small, hidden cavity. Inside lay a single, leather-bound package. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. She had found it. The final secret, the one that Nathaniel had left behind. The one that would expose the full extent of the conspiracy. She carefully removed the package, her hands trembling. It was heavy, sealed with wax, bearing no markings or address. She broke the seal, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, she found a collection of documents, even more damning than the ones she had discovered in Nathaniel's study. There were detailed accounts of financial transactions, implicating high-ranking officials in a scheme to embezzle funds from the war effort. There were coded messages, revealing a network of spies and saboteurs operating within the Allied ranks. And there were photographs, showing the conspirators meeting with enemy agents, exchanging information, plotting the downfall of their own countries. But there was something else. something that made Lillian's blood run cold. A handwritten letter, addressed to Claire, in Nathaniel's distinctive script. The letter revealed the full extent of the conspiracy, the names of all the players involved, and their ultimate goal, to establish a new world order, controlled by a select group of powerful individuals who would profit from the chaos and destruction of war. But the most shocking revelation was the identity of the mastermind behind the entire operation. It was not General Croft, as Lillian had suspected.
It was someone far closer to home.
Someone she had trusted, someone she had loved. It was her uncle, Senator Harrison Bellwether. Lillian stared at the letter, her mind reeling. Her uncle? The man she had admired, the man she had trusted, the man she was about to turn to for help? He was the traitor. He was the one who had orchestrated Nathaniel's death, the one who had tried to silence her. The price of silence was her life, and the weight of the secret she now carried felt like they would be the death of her. Everything she knew was wrong. Chapter 10. A dance of shadows and half-truths. The revelation hit Lillian like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and disoriented. Her uncle, Senator Harrison Bellwether, the man she had considered her last hope, was the mastermind behind the conspiracy that had claimed Nathaniel's life and threatened her own. The world she thought she knew, the foundations of trust and loyalty she had built her life upon, crumbled around her. She reread the letter, Nathaniel's words searing her soul. He had suspected Bellwether, but he hadn't had concrete proof. He had entrusted Claire with gathering the final evidence, the evidence that Lillian now held in her hands. He had planned to expose his uncle, to bring him to justice, but he had been betrayed, silenced before he could act. Lillian felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that consumed her grief and despair. Her uncle, the man who had pretended to care for her, to support her, had been manipulating her all along. He had used her, exploited her trust, to further his own twisted agenda. But amidst the anger, there was also a chilling fear. Bellwether was a powerful man, with connections in high places. He had already orchestrated Nathaniel's murder and Thorne's attempt to silence her. What would he do when he discovered that she possessed the evidence that could expose him? She knew she couldn't go to him. She couldn't trust anyone in Washington, anyone connected to her uncle. She was alone, isolated, hunted by a powerful enemy. She had to find a way to expose the conspiracy, to bring Bellwether and his associates to justice, without putting herself in further danger. She decided to return to England, to seek the help of Captain Reynolds. He was the only person she could trust, the only one who knew the truth about Nathaniel and Claire. He might have connections, resources that could help her. But leaving Amiens wouldn't be easy. She knew she was being watched, that Bellwether's agents were likely searching for her. She had to be careful, discreet, to avoid drawing attention to herself. She returned to her hotel, packing her belongings, preparing for a hasty departure. She destroyed the letter from Nathaniel to Claire, burning it in the fireplace, watching the flames consume the final words of his unspoken promise. She kept the other documents, the evidence that would expose Bellwether, hidden in the lining of her suitcase. As she was preparing to leave, she heard a knock on her door. Her heart leaped into her throat. Who could it be? Had Bellwether's agents found her? She cautiously opened the door, her hand reaching for the small pistol she had concealed in her bag. It was not one of Bellwether's men. It was a woman with dark hair and luminous eyes, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Lillian herself. It was Claire. Lillian stared at her, speechless. Claire? Alive? But how? She had believed her to be dead, a victim of the conspiracy, just like Nathaniel. Claire stepped into the room, her gaze sweeping over Lillian's face. You're Lillian, aren't you? Nathaniel's wife. Lillian nodded, her voice barely a whisper. And you're Claire? Claire smiled, a sad, wistful expression. Yes, I am Claire. I've been waiting for you. Waiting? How had she known Lillian was coming? Claire explained that she had been working undercover, gathering intelligence on Bellwether and his associates. She had known about Nathaniel's investigation about his death and about Lillian's discovery of the conspiracy. She had been watching Lillian, protecting her, waiting for the right moment to reveal herself. She revealed that after she sent the original documents and the letter to Nathaniel at the church, she had been captured by Bellwether's men. She had been tortured and interrogated. When Nathaniel had been reported dead, they'd given up on her, assumed her to be of no consequence. Lillian was overwhelmed, flooded with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Claire was alive, and she was on her side. She was not alone. Claire confirmed Lillian's suspicions about Bellwether, revealing that he was the mastermind behind the entire operation. He had been planning this for years, using his position and influence to build a network of spies, saboteurs, and corrupt officials. His goal was to destabilize the government, to seize power and establish a new world order based on greed and control. Claire also revealed that she had managed to escape from Bellwether's clutches with the help of a network of resistance fighters operating within France. She had been living in hiding, gathering more intelligence, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. Lillian and Claire spent the rest of the night discussing their situation, sharing information, planning their next move. They decided to work together, to combine their resources, to expose Bellwether and his conspiracy. They would go to England to seek the help of Captain Reynolds, and then they would find a way to bring the evidence to light, to alert the authorities, to bring the traitors to justice. They knew it was a dangerous game, a dance of shadows and half-truths, but they were determined to win. They were fighting for Nathaniel, for themselves, and for the future of their countries. They knew that sooner rather than later, the dance would be over. Chapter 11. The Unraveling Threads of a Wartime Conspiracy. The journey back to England was a tense, clandestine affair. Lillian and Claire, traveling under assumed names and separate routes, managed to evade detection, their every move calculated to avoid raising suspicion. They communicated through coded messages, using the cipher Claire had devised with Nathaniel, their bond forged in shared loss and a burning desire for justice. Upon arriving in England, they immediately contacted Captain Reynolds, who, true to his word, proved to be an invaluable ally. He was shocked by the revelation of Senator Bellwether's treachery, but he didn't hesitate to offer his support. Reynolds, now a respected member of British intelligence, had access to resources and connections that Lillian and Claire desperately needed. He arranged a secure meeting, a secluded country estate far from the prying eyes of Bellwether's network. There, huddled around a crackling fireplace, the three of them, Lillian, Claire, and Reynolds, laid out the evidence, piecing together the intricate web of deceit that Bellwether had woven. The documents Lillian had recovered from Nathaniel's study and Le Fantôme Damien's, combined with Claire's first-hand knowledge of Bellwether's operations, painted a damning picture. They revealed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power, implicating not only American officials, but also key figures in British and French governments. Bellwether's network had infiltrated military intelligence, sabotaged supply lines, manipulated financial markets, and even orchestrated assassinations, all in pursuit of their twisted goal, to destabilize the existing world order and establish a new regime controlled by a select few. Reynolds, with his access to intelligence networks, was able to corroborate the evidence, uncovering additional details that confirmed Bellwether's treachery. He discovered that Bellwether had been secretly funneling funds to extremist groups, fueling unrest and sowing discord in both Europe and America. He had also been collaborating with enemy agents during the war, providing them with sensitive information that had led to devastating losses for the Allied forces. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering, its implications far-reaching. Lillian, Claire, and Reynolds knew they had to act quickly to expose Bellwether and his associates before they could cause further damage. But they also knew they were facing a formidable enemy, a man with immense power and influence, a man who would stop at nothing to protect his secrets. They decided to take a multi-pronged approach. Reynolds would use his connections within British intelligence to alert the appropriate authorities, providing them with the evidence they needed to launch an official investigation. Claire, with her knowledge of Bellwether's operations and her network of contacts within the French resistance, would work to gather additional evidence and expose his collaborators in Europe. Lillian, as Nathaniel's widow and the one who had uncovered the initial evidence, would be the public face of the operation. She would use her position and her voice to bring the truth to light, to alert the American people to the treachery that had been perpetrated in their name. It was a risky plan, fraught with danger, but they were determined to see it through. They knew they were fighting for more than just justice for Nathaniel. They were fighting for the future of their countries, for the principles of democracy and freedom that Bellwether sought to destroy. As they prepared to put their plan into action, Lillian felt a renewed sense of hope, a surge of determination that pushed aside her fear and doubt. She was no longer alone, a grieving widow lost in a maze of secrets. She was a warrior, fighting alongside a brave and resourceful woman who had shared Nathaniel's love and his commitment to justice. They knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, that they would face obstacles and setbacks along the way. But they were united in their purpose, bound together by the memory of Nathaniel and the unspoken promise that echoed through the ruins of Le Fantôme d'Amiens. The threads that made up the tapestry of lies and corruption were about to be broken. Chapter 12. Between the lines of espionage and affection. With the plan in motion, a tense waiting game began. Reynolds worked discreetly within the labyrinthine corridors of British intelligence, navigating bureaucratic hurdles and political sensitivities to bring the evidence to the attention of the right people. Claire, using her network of contacts in France, gathered further intelligence on Bellwether's European collaborators, meticulously documenting their activities and communications. Lillian, meanwhile, found herself in an unfamiliar role, that of a reluctant spy. While she wasn't directly involved in gathering intelligence, she had to maintain the facade of normalcy, concealing her true purpose from the outside world, even from close friends and acquaintances who might be unknowingly connected to Bellwether's network. The strain of living a double life began to take its toll. Every conversation felt loaded with hidden meanings, every encounter a potential threat. She found solace in her growing friendship with Claire. The two women, bound together by their shared love for Nathaniel and their commitment to exposing his killers, found comfort in each other's company. They spent hours poring over the evidence, discussing strategy, sharing memories of Nathaniel. Lillian learned more about Claire's wartime experiences, her bravery and resilience, her deep affection for the man they both had loved. Claire, in turn, learned about Lillian's life before the war, her unwavering loyalty to Nathaniel, her determination to clear his name. Their conversations often drifted beyond the immediate crisis, exploring the complexities of love, loss, and betrayal. Lillian found herself drawn to Claire's strength and vulnerability, her quiet determination, and unwavering spirit. She realized that the rivalry she had initially felt towards Claire, the jealousy and resentment, had faded, replaced by a profound respect and admiration. Claire, too, seemed to find comfort in Lillian's presence. She confided in Lillian about her fears, her doubts, her lingering guilt over Nathaniel's death. She admitted that she had often felt like an outsider, a shadow in Lillian's life, a constant reminder of Nathaniel's infidelity. Lillian, in turn, confessed her own insecurities, her feelings of inadequacy, her struggle to reconcile the image of the man she loved with the secrets he had kept from her. She admitted that she had often blamed Claire for Nathaniel's betrayal, for the pain and heartbreak she had endured. But as they talked, they realized that they were both victims of circumstance, caught in the crossfire of a conflict that had stolen everything from them. They had both loved Nathaniel in their own way, and they had both suffered because of his choices. Their shared grief and their common purpose forged a bond between them, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their past relationships with Nathaniel. They found strength in each other's company, a sense of solidarity that helped them navigate the treacherous path they had chosen. One evening, as they sat together in the secluded country estate, sharing a bottle of wine and reminiscing about Nathaniel, Claire turned to Lillian, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and affection. "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice soft. "I know I was a complication in your life. But I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you. I loved Nathaniel deeply, but I also respected your relationship with him. I never wanted to come between you." Lillian met Claire's gaze, her own eyes filled with tears.
"I know," she said.
"I understand. I blamed you for a long time, but I realize now that it wasn't your fault. It was circumstances."
The war. Bellwether.
Claire nodded, her hand reaching out to clasp Lillian's.
We're in this together now, she said.
We'll see it through, for Nathaniel, and for each other. Lillian squeezed Claire's hand, a silent affirmation of their shared commitment. The lines between espionage and affection were blurring, but right now, it felt like the most natural development. The two women were supporting each other. Chapter 13. The Reckoning of a Broken Trust. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, began to turn with increasing speed. Reynolds, leveraging his position and influence within British intelligence, managed to secure a private meeting with a high-ranking official in the American embassy, a man known for his integrity and his unwavering commitment to the rule of law. He presented the evidence, the meticulously documented accounts of Bellwether's treachery, the coded messages, the photographs, the corroborating intelligence gathered from his own network. The official, initially skeptical, was quickly convinced of the gravity of the situation. He promised to take immediate action, to launch a discreet but thorough investigation. Meanwhile, Claire's efforts in France yielded significant results. She uncovered evidence linking several prominent European politicians and industrialists to Bellwether's network, revealing a complex web of financial transactions, secret meetings, and clandestine operations that spanned across national borders. The information she gathered was relayed to Reynolds, who passed it on to his American counterpart. The evidence was mounting, the conspiracy unraveling, the noose tightening around Bellwether's neck. Lillian, though increasingly anxious, remained steadfast in her resolve. She knew the confrontation with her uncle was inevitable, a reckoning that would shatter the remnants of her former life and expose the dark underbelly of power and corruption that had festered beneath the surface of Washington society. The summons came sooner than expected. A terse, official-looking letter arrived at the country estate, requesting Lillian's presence at the American Embassy in London for a matter of urgent national security. The letter was carefully worded, avoiding any specific mention of Bellwether or the conspiracy, but Lillian knew exactly what it meant. The time had come. She prepared herself meticulously, both mentally and emotionally. She reviewed the evidence, rehearsed her testimony, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. She knew Bellwether would be formidable, that he would use every trick in the book to discredit her, to deny the accusations, to protect his power and influence. But she was ready. She had the truth on her side, and she had the support of Claire and Reynolds. She would not be intimidated. She would not be silenced. The day of the meeting arrived, a cold, gray day that mirrored the somber mood that hung over the country estate. Lillian, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, a symbol of mourning and defiance, prepared to leave. Claire, her eyes filled with concern, embraced Lillian. "Be careful," she said, her voice soft. "He's dangerous. Don't underestimate him." Lillian nodded, her own heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. "I won't," she said. "I promise." Reynolds, his face grim, offered Lillian a small, silver pistol. "Take this," he said. "For protection. Just in case." Lillian hesitated, then accepted the pistol, tucking it into her handbag. She hoped she wouldn't have to use it, but she knew she had to be prepared for anything. She arrived at the American Embassy, a grand, imposing building that symbolized the power and prestige of her nation. She was escorted to a private conference room, a sterile, impersonal space that seemed designed to intimidate. Seated at the long, mahogany table were several figures she recognized. The high-ranking official Reynolds had contacted, several other government officials, and Senator Harrison Bellwether, her uncle. He looked up as she entered, his face a mask of surprise and concern. "Lillian, what are you doing here? Is everything all right?" His performance was flawless, his demeanor that of a concerned and loving uncle. But Lillian knew the truth. She saw the cold calculation in his eyes, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the barely concealed flicker of anger. The official cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wright," he said, his voice formal. "We have reason to believe that you possess information relevant to a matter of national security. We understand that you have been investigating certain irregularities related to the late Major Nathaniel Blackwood." Lillian met her uncle's gaze, her voice steady. "Yes," she said.
"I have."
"And I have evidence that proves that Major Blackwood was innocent, that he was framed for treason, and that the real traitor is sitting at this table." She pointed to Bellwether, her hand trembling slightly. "My uncle, Senator Harrison Bellwether." A gasp rippled through the room. Bellwether's face paled, but he quickly recovered, his expression turning to one of righteous indignation. "Lillian, what are you saying? Have you lost your mind? This is outrageous. I am a loyal servant of this nation. I have dedicated my life to public service." His voice trailed off as Lillian placed the envelope containing the evidence on the table, her gaze unwavering. "The evidence speaks for itself," she said. "The documents, the coded messages, the photographs, they all point to you, Uncle. You betrayed your country. You betrayed Nathaniel, and you tried to betray me." The official opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the documents. The room fell silent, the only sound the rustling of paper, the heavy breathing of the assembled figures. The broken trust was, at long last, about to be reckoned with. Chapter 14. Scars of the Battlefield, Scars of the Heart. The silence in the room was thick with tension, broken only by the rustling of documents as the officials scrutinized the evidence Lillian had presented. Bellwether, his initial facade of righteous indignation crumbling, sat rigidly in his chair, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. He attempted to bluster, to deny the accusations, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. The coded messages, deciphered with a key from the Raven, revealed the intricate details of his conspiracy, his communications with enemy agents, his sabotage of the Allied war effort. The photographs, taken by Claire and other resistance operatives, showed him meeting with known collaborators, exchanging money and information. The financial records, meticulously documented by Nathaniel, exposed his embezzlement of war funds, his personal enrichment at the expense of his country. As the officials continued their examination, Lillian recounted her story, her voice trembling with emotion but unwavering in its conviction. She described her discovery of Nathaniel's diary, her investigation, her encounter with Thorne, her journey to Amiens, her meeting with Claire, and the final, damning evidence she had found in Le Fantôme d'Amiens. She spoke of Nathaniel's love for his country, his unwavering commitment to duty, his betrayal by the very people he had trusted. She spoke of Claire's bravery, her resilience, her unwavering dedication to exposing the truth. She spoke of her own pain, her grief, her anger, and her determination to see justice served. Bellwether, cornered and desperate, launched a series of counterattacks. He accused Lillian of being delusional, of being manipulated by Claire, of seeking revenge for Nathaniel's supposed infidelity. He claimed the documents were forgeries, the photographs fabricated, the coded messages misinterpreted. He even attempted to implicate Reynolds, suggesting that he was part of a British plot to undermine American interests. But his efforts were futile. The evidence was too strong, too consistent, too damning. The officials, initially skeptical, were now convinced of his guilt. They questioned him relentlessly, exposing the inconsistencies in his story, the lies he had told, the secrets he had tried to keep hidden. As the interrogation progressed, Bellwether's composure began to crack. He grew increasingly agitated, his voice rising in anger and desperation. He lashed out at Lillian, accusing her of betraying him, of destroying his life, of ruining his reputation. "You were like a daughter to me, Lillian," he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "I took you in, I cared for you, I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me? By siding with my enemies, by spreading lies about me?" Lillian met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You were never a father to me, Uncle," she said, her voice cold. "You were a manipulator, a liar, a traitor. You used me. You used Nathaniel. You used everyone around you to further your own selfish ambitions. You don't deserve my loyalty or my respect." The confrontation reached its climax when the official presented Bellwether with the letter Lillian had found in Le Fantôme d'Amiens, the letter Nathaniel had written to Claire, revealing the full extent of the conspiracy and implicating Bellwether as the mastermind. Bellwether stared at the letter, his face ashen. He recognized Nathaniel's handwriting, the familiar script that sealed his fate. He knew he was finished. He slumped back in his chair, his shoulders slumping, his eyes filled with defeat. He made no further attempt to deny the accusations. He simply sat there, silent and broken, a man stripped of his power, his prestige, his carefully constructed facade. The official ordered Bellwether's immediate arrest. As he was being led away, he turned to Lillian, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and regret. "You may have won this battle, Lillian," he said, his voice low and menacing. "But you haven't won the war. There are others who will continue what I started. You can't stop us. You can't stop the future." Lillian watched him go, her heart heavy with a mixture of relief and foreboding. She had exposed Bellwether. She had brought him to justice, but she knew he was right. The conspiracy was bigger than one man. There were others who shared his twisted vision, others who would continue to fight for their cause. The meeting concluded, and Lillian was escorted from the embassy. As she stepped out into the cold London air, she felt a profound sense of exhaustion, of emptiness. She had achieved her goal. She had cleared Nathaniel's name. She had avenged his death. But the victory felt hollow, tinged with sadness and loss. The scars of the battlefield, both physical and emotional, ran deep. She had lost her husband, her uncle, her innocence, her faith in the world she thought she knew. She had been forced to confront the darkest aspects of human nature, the greed, the corruption, the betrayal that lurked beneath the surface of power and privilege. But she had also found strength, resilience, and a newfound sense of purpose. She had discovered the true meaning of courage, of loyalty, of love. She had forged a bond with Claire, a woman who had shared her loss and her determination to fight for justice. As she walked away from the embassy, she knew her journey was far from over. The war was not won. But she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the truth and the memory of the man she loved. The healing could start. Chapter 15. A glimmer of hope in the ruins of war. The immediate aftermath of Bellwether's arrest was a whirlwind of activity. News of the conspiracy and the senator's involvement sent shockwaves through Washington and beyond. The press, initially cautious, soon seized upon the story, publishing sensational headlines and detailed accounts of the treachery that had been uncovered. Lillian, thrust into the spotlight, found herself besieged by reporters, eager to hear her story, to capture her image, to paint her as a heroine, a grieving widow who had single-handedly brought down a powerful and corrupt politician. She handled the attention with grace and dignity, refusing to be drawn into the sensationalism, focusing instead on honoring Nathaniel's memory and exposing the full extent of the conspiracy. Claire, remaining in the shadows, continued to work with Reynolds, providing crucial intelligence and support to the ongoing investigation. The arrests continued as more and more of Bellwether's associates were implicated and brought to justice. The network of spies, saboteurs, and corrupt officials that he had so carefully constructed began to unravel, exposing a web of deceit that reached into the highest echelons of power in both Europe and America. Lillian, despite the public acclaim, found herself struggling with the emotional toll of the past few months. The constant scrutiny, the endless interviews, the reliving of her trauma, left her feeling drained and vulnerable. She longed for peace, for quiet, for a chance to heal, to rebuild her life. She decided to return to Amiens, to the place where Nathaniel had found solace and where she had discovered the final piece of the puzzle that had exposed Bellwether. She felt drawn to Le Fantôme d'Amiens, to the crumbling church that held the echoes of their unspoken promise, the symbol of their shared commitment to justice. She traveled alone, leaving behind the clamor of London and the suffocating attention of the press. She arrived in Amiens on a crisp autumn day, the air filled with the scent of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The town, still bearing the scars of war, seemed quieter now, more peaceful, as if it, too, were beginning to heal. She made her way to the outskirts of town, to the abandoned church that stood silhouetted against the pale sky. As she approached, she felt a sense of anticipation, a mixture of trepidation and hope. She entered the church, her footsteps echoing through the silent nave. The interior was as she remembered it, the floor covered in rubble, the walls scarred with graffiti and the ravages of time. But the broken angel, beneath the shattered stained glass window, still stood, its gaze fixed on the distant horizon, a symbol of resilience and enduring hope. Lillian stood beneath the angel, her hand resting on the cold stone, her eyes closed, remembering Nathaniel, remembering Claire, remembering their shared struggle for justice. She felt a sense of peace, a quiet serenity that she hadn't experienced since before the war. As she stood there, she heard a sound, a soft footfall behind her. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. It was Claire. She was standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the afternoon light, her face radiant, her eyes filled with a mixture of joy and relief. "Lillian," she said, her voice soft. "You came back." Lillian smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes," she said. "I came back." The two women embraced, a long, heartfelt embrace that spoke volumes of their shared journey, their shared loss, their shared hope. They had been through so much. They had faced so many dangers. They had overcome so many obstacles. And they had emerged, stronger, more resilient, more determined than ever. They spent the afternoon together, walking through the ruins of the church, sharing their thoughts, their feelings, their dreams for the future. They spoke of Nathaniel, of his bravery, his integrity, his unwavering commitment to justice. They spoke of their own lives, of the challenges they had faced, of the scars they carried, of the hope they now shared. Claire revealed that she had decided to stay in Amiens, to help rebuild the town, to work with the local community, to create a better future for the children who had been orphaned by the war. She had found a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, in this war-torn land. Lillian, in turn, confessed that she was unsure of her future, that she didn't know where she belonged, what she wanted to do with her life. She had spent so long fighting for justice, for Nathaniel, that she had lost sight of her own dreams, her own aspirations. Claire smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "You'll find your way, Lillian," she said. "You're strong, you're resilient, you're capable of anything. You just need to give yourself time to heal, to discover what truly matters to you." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ruined church, Lillian and Claire stood together beneath the broken angel, their hands clasped, their hearts filled with a glimmer of hope. The ruins of war surrounded them, but within those crumbling walls, a new beginning was taking shape. A friendship was blossoming, and a sense of purpose. Chapter 16. The Tangled Web of Allegiance and Betrayal. Lillian stayed in Amiens longer than she initially intended. The quiet serenity of the town, the stark beauty of Le Fantôme d'Amiens, and the growing bond with Claire offered a solace she hadn't found anywhere else. They spent their days exploring the surrounding countryside, visiting local markets, sharing meals and stories, slowly piecing together the fragments of their shattered lives. Claire's work with the local community, helping to rebuild homes and schools, providing support for war orphans and widows, inspired Lillian. She saw the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for hope and healing even in the face of unimaginable loss. She began to volunteer alongside Claire, finding a sense of purpose in contributing to the town's recovery. But the shadow of Bellwether's conspiracy still lingered. While the main players had been brought to justice, Lillian knew that there were others, lesser-known figures who had been involved in the plot, individuals who had managed to escape detection. She also suspected that Bellwether's network might have extended beyond the individuals who had been identified, that there were hidden connections, secret alliances that remained to be uncovered. One evening, as she and Claire were sitting by the fire in Claire's small cottage, Lillian shared her concerns. "I can't shake the feeling that we're not finished," she said, her voice troubled. "That there's more to this conspiracy than we know." Claire nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I agree," she said. "Bellwether was powerful, but he wasn't the only one. There were others who benefited from his actions, others who shared his twisted vision." They decided to revisit the evidence, to examine the documents, the coded messages, the photographs, searching for any overlooked clues, any hidden connections that might lead them to the remaining conspirators. They spent hours poring over the materials, meticulously analyzing every detail, cross-referencing names and dates, tracing financial transactions, searching for patterns and anomalies. And then they found something. A series of coded messages, exchanged between Bellwether and an unknown individual, referred to a Project Nightingale, a clandestine operation that seemed to be separate from the main conspiracy. The messages were vague, cryptic, but they hinted at something significant, something that Bellwether had been keeping secret even from his closest associates. Lillian and Claire realized that Project Nightingale might be the key to uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy, to identifying the remaining players and their ultimate goals. But they needed more information. They needed to decipher the coded messages to understand the nature of the project, to identify the individuals involved. They decided to seek the help of Captain Reynolds, who was still working with British intelligence to track down the remnants of Bellwether's network. They sent him a coded message, outlining their discovery and requesting his assistance. Reynolds responded quickly, confirming their suspicions. Project Nightingale was a highly classified operation, known only to a select few within British and American intelligence. It involved the development of a new type of chemical weapon, a deadly gas that could be used to disable entire populations. The project had been officially shut down after the war, but Reynolds suspected that Bellwether had secretly continued the research, using his network to acquire the necessary resources and expertise. He believed that Bellwether intended to use the weapon to further his own ambitions, to create chaos and instability, to seize power and establish his new world order. Lillian and Claire were horrified. They realized that they were facing an even greater threat than they had imagined. Bellwether's conspiracy was not just about political power and financial gain, it was about mass murder, about unleashing a weapon of unimaginable destruction upon the world. They knew they had to stop him. They had to find Project Nightingale, to expose it, to prevent the weapon from being used. But they also knew that they were running out of time. Bellwether, even in prison, was a dangerous man. He still had influence, connections, resources. He could still orchestrate events from behind bars. They decided to divide their efforts. Claire, with her knowledge of the French underground and her contacts within the intelligence community, would focus on tracking down the location of Project Nightingale, on identifying the scientists and engineers who were involved in its development. Lillian, with her access to Nathaniel's documents and her growing understanding of Bellwether's network, would focus on uncovering any hidden connections, any secret alliances that might lead them to the remaining conspirators. They knew they were taking a huge risk, that they were walking into a tangled web of allegiance and betrayal, where one wrong move could cost them their lives. But they were determined to see it through, to finish what Nathaniel had started, to prevent another war, another tragedy. The clock was ticking. Chapter 17. Whispers across the trenches. Echoes in the present. Lillian returned to Washington, D.C., a city transformed by the scandal of Bellwether's betrayal. The once familiar streets now seemed alien, filled with whispers and suspicion. She moved back into her Georgetown home, but the house felt empty, haunted by the ghosts of the past. Mrs. Davis, ever loyal, remained by her side, a steadfast presence in a world turned upside down. Lillian's task was daunting, to sift through the remnants of Bellwether's network, to identify any remaining conspirators, to uncover any hidden connections to Project Nightingale. She started with Nathaniel's papers, the documents she had recovered from his study and Le Fantôme Damien's, searching for any overlooked clues, any subtle hints that might lead her to the truth. She also began to reach out to former contacts, individuals who had known Nathaniel, who had worked with him during the war, who might have information about Bellwether's activities. It was a delicate process, fraught with risk. She couldn't be sure who to trust, who might still be loyal to Bellwether, who might be involved in the conspiracy. She started with Captain David Reynolds, who had returned to the United States after assisting Lillian and Claire in England. Reynolds, now working for a private security firm, had maintained his contacts within the intelligence community. He agreed to help Lillian, providing her with information and guidance, discreetly vetting her contacts, helping her navigate the treacherous landscape of Washington society. One name kept recurring in Lillian's investigation: General Alistair Croft, the man who had been Nathaniel's mentor, the man who had appeared in the photograph with Thorne. Lillian had initially dismissed Croft as a possible conspirator, believing him to be a loyal and honorable soldier. But the evidence was mounting, suggesting that Croft had been more involved in Bellwether's activities than she had previously realized. She discovered that Croft had been instrumental in securing funding for Project Nightingale, using his influence within the military to divert resources and personnel to the secret operation. She also found evidence that Croft had been in contact with several of the individuals who had been implicated in the conspiracy, including some of the European politicians and industrialists who had been identified by Claire. Lillian decided to confront Croft directly. It was a risky move, but she felt she had no other choice. She needed to know the truth, to understand the extent of his involvement, to determine whether he was a willing participant in Bellwether's plot or simply a pawn in his game. She arranged a meeting with Croft at his home, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Washington. The general, initially cordial, grew increasingly uncomfortable as Lillian presented her evidence, her questions probing and direct. He denied any knowledge of Project Nightingale, claiming that he had been misled by Bellwether, that he had believed the project to be a legitimate research initiative. He insisted that he had no involvement in the conspiracy, that he was as shocked and appalled by Bellwether's treachery as anyone else. But Lillian didn't believe him. She saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, the subtle tremor in his voice, the beads of sweat that formed on his forehead. She knew he was hiding something, that he was not telling her the whole truth. As she pressed him further, Croft's composure began to crack. He grew agitated, defensive, his denials increasingly vehement. He accused Lillian of being obsessed with revenge, of trying to destroy his reputation, of tarnishing the memory of a great man. Bellwether was a patriot. He shouted, his face flushed with anger. He was trying to protect this country, to make it strong again. You don't understand the sacrifices he made, the risks he took. Lillian stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. He was a traitor, General, she said. He betrayed his country. He betrayed his friends. He betrayed Nathaniel. And you were complicit in his crimes. Croft stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of rage and despair. He knew he was cornered, that his lies were no longer sustainable. He slumped back in his chair, his shoulders sagging, his spirit broken. He confessed. He admitted that he had been involved in Project Nightingale, that he had known about Bellwether's plans, that he had helped him secure funding and resources for the project. He claimed that he had believed Bellwether's intentions to be noble, that he had thought the weapon would be used as a deterrent, a way to prevent future wars. But he also revealed that he had grown increasingly uneasy about Bellwether's methods, about his ruthlessness, about his willingness to sacrifice innocent lives to achieve his goals. He had tried to distance himself from the project, but it was too late. He was already implicated, trapped in a web of deceit and betrayal. Croft's confession was a major breakthrough, but it also raised more questions. He claimed that he didn't know the current location of Project Nightingale, that he had lost contact with the scientists and engineers who were involved in its development. He insisted that he had no knowledge of Bellwether's plans to use the weapon, that he had never intended for it to fall into the wrong hands. Lillian wasn't sure whether to believe him. She suspected that he was still hiding something, that he knew more than he was letting on. But she also realized that he was a broken man, a man consumed by guilt and regret. He was no longer a threat. She left Croft's estate, her mind racing, her heart heavy with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. She had uncovered another piece of the puzzle, but the picture was still incomplete. She still didn't know where Project Nightingale was hidden, who was in control of it, and what their plans were. She knew she had to find out, and she had to do it quickly. The whispers across the trenches of the past were now echoing in the present, and the threat of another, even more devastating war loomed large. The lives of many, once again, depended on her. Chapter 18. The Cost of Redemption and the Path to Forgiveness. Croft's confession, while significant, left Lillian with a crucial piece of the puzzle still missing: the location of Project Nightingale. The general's claim of ignorance felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage some shred of his shattered reputation. Lillian, however, was running out of leads. The official investigation, spurred by her initial evidence and Reynolds's intelligence work, had stalled. Bellwether, imprisoned but defiant, refused to cooperate, his silence a formidable obstacle. Lillian decided to revisit a source she had previously dismissed, Thorne, the man who had broken into her home, the man who had tried to silence her. Thorne, now a prisoner, was a long shot, but he was also a direct link to Bellwether, a man who might possess crucial information about Project Nightingale. With Reynolds's help, Lillian secured permission to visit Thorne in prison. The meeting was tense, filled with animosity and suspicion. Thorne, initially defiant, refused to speak, his eyes filled with hatred for Lillian, the woman who had helped bring down his employer. Lillian, however, was prepared. She had brought with her a copy of Nathaniel's diary, the one she had found hidden in his study. She opened the diary to a specific entry, one where Nathaniel had written about Thorne, describing him as a ruthless and unscrupulous operative, a man who would do anything for money. She read the entry aloud, her voice steady and unwavering. Thorne listened, his face growing pale, his composure slowly crumbling. He had underestimated Lillian, underestimated her determination, her resourcefulness. She then presented him with a choice. He could cooperate, tell her everything he knew about Project Nightingale, and she would advocate for a reduced sentence, a chance for him to start a new life. Or he could remain silent, face the full consequences of his actions, and spend the rest of his days in prison. Thorne hesitated, his mind clearly racing. He was a pragmatist, a survivor. He knew that Bellwether was finished, that there was no loyalty among thieves. He also knew that Lillian was his only hope, his only chance for redemption. He made his decision. He began to talk. He revealed that Project Nightingale was not a single location, but a network of hidden laboratories scattered across Europe and America. He provided Lillian with the addresses of several of these facilities, the names of the scientists and engineers who were involved in the project, and the security protocols that were in place. He also revealed that Bellwether had been planning to use the chemical weapon to attack several major cities, creating chaos and instability, paving the way for his rise to power. He had intended to blame the attacks on foreign enemies, using the ensuing panic and fear to consolidate his control and establish his new world order. Lillian was horrified by the scale of Bellwether's ambition, by the sheer ruthlessness of his plan. She realized that she had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Thorne's information was crucial, but it was also incomplete. He didn't know the location of all the laboratories, nor did he know the exact details of Bellwether's plan. He also warned Lillian that some of the facilities were heavily guarded, protected by loyal operatives who would not hesitate to use deadly force. Lillian thanked Thorne for his cooperation, promising to fulfill her end of the bargain. She left the prison, her mind racing, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She had the information she needed, but she also knew that she was facing a formidable challenge. She immediately contacted Reynolds, relaying Thorne's information and requesting his assistance in coordinating a series of raids on the Project Nightingale facilities. Reynolds, with his contacts within British and American intelligence, agreed to help, mobilizing resources and personnel for the operation. The raids were carried out simultaneously in multiple locations across Europe and America. The operation was swift and decisive, catching the conspirators by surprise. Several of the laboratories were secured, the chemical weapon confiscated, the scientists and engineers apprehended. But some of the facilities were empty, the personnel and equipment having been moved before the raids could take place. Lillian knew that Bellwether, even from prison, had managed to anticipate their moves, to warn his remaining associates. The fight was not over. Lillian, despite the setbacks, remained determined to track down the remaining facilities, to neutralize the threat of Project Nightingale once and for all. She knew that the cost of failure was too high, that the lives of millions of people were at stake. She also knew that she was not alone. She had Claire, Reynolds, and a growing network of allies who were committed to exposing the conspiracy and bringing the remaining culprits to justice. She had found her path, a way to move forward and seek retribution.
And it was not over.
Chapter 19. Unmasking the Truth, Embracing the Future. The successful raids on some of the Project Nightingale facilities, while a significant victory, highlighted the remaining threat. Bellwether, despite being incarcerated, still wielded influence, his network proving more resilient than anticipated. Lillian, Claire, and Reynolds knew they needed a final, decisive blow to dismantle the conspiracy completely. The key, they believed, lay in uncovering the remaining hidden laboratories and, more importantly, identifying the individual who had helped Bellwether orchestrate the evacuation of those facilities. Someone with inside knowledge, someone with access to intelligence, someone who had betrayed their trust. Lillian focused her attention on the coded messages exchanged between Bellwether and the unknown individual mentioned in the earlier communications discovered among Claire's findings in Amiens. These messages, while cryptic, hinted at a deep personal connection, a relationship built on trust and shared secrets. It was a long shot, but Lillian felt that deciphering these messages could lead them to the final conspirator. She spent days poring over the messages, using the Raven cipher and other decryption techniques she had learned from Claire and Reynolds. The process was slow and frustrating, the messages deliberately obscure, designed to withstand scrutiny. But Lillian was persistent. She noticed a recurring pattern, a subtle reference to a specific location, a place that held significance for both Bellwether and the unknown individual. The location was mentioned indirectly, using coded language and veiled allusions, but Lillian recognized it. It was Bellwether's childhood home, a sprawling estate in upstate New York, a place he had often spoken of with fondness, a place that held sentimental value for him. Lillian remembered visiting the estate with Bellwether when she was a child, a memory that had been buried beneath years of grief and betrayal. She realized that the estate might be more than just a sentimental landmark. It might be a key location in the conspiracy, a hidden command center, a storage facility for the remaining chemical weapons, or even the final laboratory. She shared her findings with Claire and Reynolds, who agreed that the estate was worth investigating. They decided to launch a covert operation, a reconnaissance mission to determine whether the estate was being used for illicit purposes. Reynolds, using his contacts within the intelligence community, secured satellite imagery of the estate, which revealed unusual activity, increased security, frequent deliveries, and the construction of a new, unidentified structure on the property. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to warrant further investigation. Lillian, Claire, and Reynolds planned the operation meticulously, aware of the risks involved. They knew that Bellwether's remaining loyalists would be heavily armed and prepared to defend the estate at all costs. They assembled a small team of trusted operatives, individuals with specialized skills in surveillance, infiltration, and combat. They equipped themselves with the latest technology, including night vision goggles, encrypted communication devices, and non-lethal weapons. Under the cover of darkness, they infiltrated the estate, moving silently and stealthily through the sprawling grounds. They encountered several security patrols, which they managed to evade or neutralize without raising the alarm. They reached the unidentified structure, a large, windowless building that resembled a warehouse. They breached the security perimeter, using specialized tools to disable the alarms and unlock the doors. Inside, they found what they were looking for. It was a fully operational laboratory, equipped with state-of-the-art equipment for producing chemical weapons. They found vats of toxic chemicals, sophisticated machinery, and detailed plans for the production and deployment of the deadly gas. But they also found something else. A single figure, hunched over a computer terminal, frantically typing commands. It was General Alistair Croft. Lillian was stunned. Croft?
Again?
He had confessed. He had claimed to be remorseful. He had promised to cooperate. Had he been playing them all along? Croft, startled by their intrusion, turned around, his face a mask of fear and desperation. He reached for a weapon, but Reynolds was faster, disarming him before he could fire. Croft was captured, the laboratory secured, the threat of Project Nightingale finally neutralized. The truth was unmasked, all thanks to a childhood memory. The long and hard road had finally found its conclusion. Or so it seemed. Chapter 20. A new dawn breaking through the ashes. Croft's capture at the hidden laboratory marked the definitive end of Project Nightingale and the Bellwether conspiracy. The general, confronted with irrefutable evidence and facing the prospect of life imprisonment, finally broke. He confessed everything, revealing the full extent of his involvement, his motivations, and the names of the few remaining collaborators who had managed to evade detection. His confession was a chilling testament to the corrosive power of ambition and the insidious nature of betrayal. He had been seduced by Bellwether's vision of a new world order, a world ruled by strength and efficiency, a world where the weak and the unworthy would be eliminated. He had convinced himself that he was acting for the greater good, that the ends justified the means, that the deaths of millions were a necessary sacrifice for the creation of a better future. But beneath the veneer of ideological conviction, Lillian saw a broken man, a man consumed by guilt and regret, a man who had lost his way, who had betrayed his principles, who had destroyed his own life and the lives of countless others. With Croft's confession, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The remaining conspirators were apprehended, the network dismantled, the threat of another war averted. The investigation was officially closed, the case resolved, justice served. Lillian, Claire, and Reynolds emerged from the ordeal scarred but victorious. They had faced unimaginable dangers. They had overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. They had exposed a conspiracy that threatened to plunge the world into darkness. But the victory was bittersweet. The scars of the past, the loss of Nathaniel, the betrayal of Bellwether, the horrors of war, would always remain. They had witnessed the darkest aspects of human nature, the capacity for cruelty and deception that lurked beneath the surface of even the most seemingly honorable individuals. But they had also discovered the resilience of the human spirit, the power of love, loyalty, and courage, the ability to find hope and healing even in the face of unimaginable loss. They had forged bonds of friendship and camaraderie that would last a lifetime. Lillian, finally free from the burden of the conspiracy, began to rebuild her life. She sold her Georgetown home, the place that held too many painful memories, and decided to make a fresh start. She returned to Amiens, to the town that had offered her solace and a sense of purpose, to the place where she had found a new friend, a new love, a new beginning. Claire welcomed her with open arms, their bond stronger than ever. They decided to work together, to continue their efforts to rebuild the town, to support the war orphans and widows, to create a better future for the children who had been scarred by the conflict. They purchased a small cottage together, overlooking the ruins of Le Fantôme d'Amiens, the church that had become a symbol of their shared journey, their resilience, their hope. They filled the cottage with light and laughter, with flowers and books, with the warmth of their friendship. They often visited the church, standing beneath the broken angel, remembering Nathaniel, remembering the unspoken promise that had brought them together, the promise to fight for justice, to build a better world. Lillian found a sense of peace in Amiens, a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She discovered a new passion, a new purpose, in helping others, in making a difference in the lives of those who had suffered so much. She also found love. It happened slowly, gradually, unexpectedly. She and Claire, drawn together by their shared loss and their shared commitment to rebuilding their lives, found themselves falling in love. It was a love born of friendship, of respect, of admiration, a love that transcended the boundaries of their past relationships, a love that offered healing and hope. They embraced their new love, their new future, with open hearts and open minds. They knew that their journey would not be easy, that they would face challenges and obstacles along the way. But they were ready. They had faced worse.
They had survived.
They had triumphed. As the sun set over the ruins of Le Fantôme d'Amiens, casting long shadows across the war-torn landscape, Lillian and Claire stood together, hand in hand, their hearts filled with love and gratitude. A new dawn was breaking, a new chapter beginning, a new future unfolding. The ashes, at long last, had given way to a beautiful future. Epilogue. Years passed. The scars of war, both physical and emotional, slowly began to fade, replaced by the gentle patina of time. Amiens, once a symbol of devastation and loss, blossomed anew, its streets filled with the laughter of children, its buildings restored, its spirit renewed. Lillian and Claire remained at the heart of the town's revival, their tireless efforts transforming the community, creating a haven of hope and healing for those who had suffered so much. Their cottage, overlooking the ruins of Le Fantôme d'Amiens, became a gathering place, a sanctuary for friends, neighbors, and the countless individuals whose lives they had touched. The church itself, though still in ruins, became a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. Lillian and Claire often visited it, standing beneath the broken angel, remembering Nathaniel, remembering the unspoken promise that had brought them together, the promise to fight for justice, to build a better world. They never forgot Nathaniel, nor did they forget the lessons they had learned during the dark days of the conspiracy. They remained vigilant, aware of the fragility of peace, of the constant threat of those who would seek to exploit fear and division for their own gain. But they also embraced the present, savoring the simple joys of life, the beauty of the surrounding countryside, the warmth of their friendship, the depth of their love. They traveled, explored, learned, and grew, their bond strengthening with each passing year. Their relationship, once a source of surprise and even scandal, became a source of inspiration, a testament to the power of love to transcend boundaries, to heal wounds, to create new beginnings. They were accepted, embraced by the community, their love story woven into the fabric of Amiens' rebirth. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they sat together on the porch of their cottage, watching the sun set over the fields of golden wheat, Lillian turned to Claire, her eyes filled with a lifetime of love and gratitude. "Do you remember," she asked, her voice soft, "that first day we met in your hotel room in Amiens? You said you had been waiting for me." Claire smiled, her hand reaching out to clasp Lillian's. "I had," she said. "I knew, somehow, that we were meant to find each other, that we were meant to be together." Lillian nodded, her heart overflowing with emotion. "I didn't understand it then," she said. "I was so lost, so broken. But you were right. We were meant to be." They sat in silence for a moment, their hands intertwined, their hearts connected, their souls at peace. The ruins of Le Fantôme d'Amiens stood silhouetted against the fading light, a silent witness to their journey, their love, their enduring legacy. The war had taken so much from them, but it had also given them something precious, something unexpected, something that would last a lifetime. It had given them each other. It had given them a future. It had given them hope.